Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
The other day, my flatmate was making me a peppermint tea, and he said, "Would you like the bag leaving in or taken out?" And it's very hard because if you leave the bag in, then over time, the cup of tea itself as a whole will get stronger, and it might appear like the bag is getting weaker, but it's now part of a stronger cup of tea. Whereas, if you take the bag out, the tea is now quite weak, and the bag itself goes directly in the bin.
Quiet Riot. Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the cool down and stretch after this week's 10K run. I'm Naomi.
And I'm Alex. How are you, Naomi?
I'm good.
You've got a couple of weeks off the podcast, although not off work, coming up.
Yes, other exciting projects to distract me for a couple of weeks, so I shall miss you and Kenny dearly.
I'm compelled to ask, what will we not be talking about today?
Well, we're not going to be talking about the royals and the latest scandal hitting Prince Andrew and being stripped of even more of his titles, although not all of them, I should hasten to add. But
I mean, it's not even the latest scandal, is it?
Well, I mean, there's
still
this book.
the same scandal.
Posthumous book from Virginia Giuffre coming out. Obviously, the palace has had sight of it and they're like, this is so bad for you. We've got to get ahead of it. We always hear rotten apple in relation to the Met Police when a policeman does something terrible. And you'll probably hear that around royalist circles, oh, well, he's a bad egg within the family. But as you said before, the full phrase is one rotten apple spoils the whole barrel.
Quite. I was actually having an exchange with Sam Friedman about this only 2 days ago about the whole rotten apple thing, because it's a hoodoo of his as well. The saying is not about how if you remove the rotten apple, everything else is edible. It's about the opposite. It's about the toxic effect
All it takes
of something rotten around it. That's the whole thing. Anyway, the reason I don't want to talk about it is because as far as I'm concerned, with the exception of a ceremonial head of state, if that's the way the UK chooses to be, I don't think any of them should have titles. Even if there is an argument to be made about a monarch as a ceremonial head of state, and we have seen some of the benefit of that during the Trump visit, the good side of being able to kind of remove yourself and speak from a different capacity, I still don't think it's enough of an argument, but there you have it. But even if there is an argument for that, for the king or the queen and the immediate heir to have a position, what is the argument for the wider family all having titles and privileges and living in palaces and being given vast bits of land?
I agree. Therefore, stripping him of silly medieval titles is not really a punishment. And this whole thing being painted about embarrassing the royals and, that the royals aren't able to get on with their work because of him. And the focus is then taken away from justice for the abused, mostly girls, by rich and powerful men. Andrew should be stripped of all his titles, including his Navy rank.
Anyway, we said we weren't going to talk about it.
We aren't going to talk about it, but we've talked about it. Bloody hell. So come on, then, what should we actually talk about, Alex?
Well, I think there's no avoiding the mess that is the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv match next month, is there? We will try to break it down away from the headline hysteria a little bit.
Ahead of the budget, I'd love to talk about some exclusive research that Better Britain has done around why Reeves really is on the money to link the state of the economy to the damage caused by leaving the single market. I think that will be quite interesting for listeners to hear.
And finally, with the weather becoming undeniably autumnal, I think, I'd like to talk about one of the joys of this season, comfort food. What do you think
Oh,
about that?
delicious. I'd love to. I'd love to. Now, before we crack on, a reminder that our funding model is very different to most other podcasts out there because we make everything fully accessible to everyone at the same time. And so we rely on people who can afford to do so to support the show from as little as a fiver on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod, not because they get special treatment or early releases, but because they think good quality information is a public good and should be supported.
Hear, hear. And if I sound a little bit extra jazzy today, let me tell listeners that I've got a really, really bad cold developing and a bit of a sore throat. So apologies for the Nat King Cole-esque quality
It's
of what's
sexy,
going
don't
on.
worry. Quiet Riot. Next month, an Israeli football team, Maccabi Tel Aviv, is set to play Aston Villa in the Europa League at Villa Park in Birmingham. The question of the last few days is whether or not its fans will be permitted to come as well. The police don't think it's safe, the government and almost every opposition leader thinks otherwise. And violence surrounding football matches is infrequent, but familiar enough. Some of us, not me, will be old enough to remember Luton Town Football Club banning all away fans after a riot erupted with Millwall in 1985. In 2021, the top divisions of the Belgian Pro League banned visiting supporters for a period after 2 matches were marred by violence with away fans. And in November 2023, Legia Warsaw fans were involved in a large-scale disorder before their UEFA Europa Conference League match with Aston Villa, after which UEFA banned Legia from selling tickets to their away supporters for the next 5 European away matches. But none of those examples were set against the political backdrop we face today. A fragile ceasefire in Gaza, the murder of Jews at Temple just a fortnight before in Manchester, and a far-right movement becoming increasingly active under the leadership of Tommy 10 Names Yaxley Lennon, who himself this week is wrapped in an Israeli flag. So, Alex, talk us through the what and when of all of this. Who is the group that declared it unsafe for fans to attend, and what's their rationale?
It's the group that usually does this in matches. So after what I understand was a months-long process, West Midlands Police, along with various stakeholders, including from the clubs in question, classified the fixture as high risk. This is based on previous incidents, current intelligence. There have been other violent clashes involving Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. I have to make that distinction because there is actually Maccabi Haifa. So there was, during a 2024 match in Amsterdam against Ajax, the whole thing turned into a security nightmare. So it is a tricky situation because you are effectively punishing away fans, but it's not unusual. It happens all the time. And I think that is important to say. If there is a particularly heated derby or a particularly heated situation that makes a match tricky, like Team A has just signed the big star of Team B, there are often restrictions on fans. I think both things are true. I think this is political and has been politicized.
Yeah.
They're not mutually exclusive.
And I think that's why it's so interesting to talk about it on a political podcast. I thought it was really interesting reading what the UK football policing unit put out. And it read to me like a real fuck you kind of response. I'll just read it out quickly. It is important that we respect and support the structures in place for making these decisions. If there are any adverse incidents, then we, are the ones that will be held responsible. The UK FPU, in the wake of the Casey review following the serious disorder at Wembley in 2021, has suggested that if the government want a role in regulating football events that could be termed, quote, events of national significance, end quote, then they need to bring forward legislation to formalise this to ensure accountability sits with decision makers.
Wow, that's interesting.
I read that as, if we think this is unsafe and you're going to make us do it anyway, we're going to be held responsible for a thing that we said shouldn't go ahead for being unable to contain the trouble. But if you bring forward legislation to mark this as an event of national significance and their violence, then this is on you, the government, not on us, the police. And Alex, we've sort of seen this politicization of the police, or forcing the police to making political decisions in marches, demonstrations over the last few years. So are we just sort of in danger of forcing the police to make political decisions if this kind of legislation they're asking for isn't brought forward?
It's a tough one again. I think it's important to say that actually, despite presentationally this looking a particular way, the government is not trying to overturn the decision. It has said that it's disappointed with the decision. It can say things like that. You know, the Home Secretary can say that I don't think it's the right decision, but they're not saying the police should make a different decision because that's an operational matter. And getting involved in operational aspects of policing would be, I think, a big breach of certain bright lines that are in place for very good reason. So what the government is actually doing, I think, is right, which is it's saying, we don't like this decision. And so today, Saturday, as we record, it's gone to the police, to West Midlands Police and their football policing unit, and it said, tell me what resources you need for this to go ahead, which I think is actually the right approach to this. To say, look, this creates a big headache for us internationally, diplomatically, domestically, politically. We don't want to get involved in your operational discretion, but tell us what extra we could do to make you come to a different conclusion. And I think that's okay. I think that is just about skating the right side of that line. What do you think?
Well, I tell you what I find interesting is that we haven't heard from Lisa Nandy, who is, of course, the Secretary of State for Sport. And if there is a role within football for the Secretary of State for DCMS, then surely it is to be that bridge, that link between government and community when it comes to football clubs, football fans, and all of that. And all she's done in the last 24 hours that I've seen is retweet the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. And the Home Secretary has basically said, this is about anti-Semitism. It is a stain on our society that shames us all. Every football fan, whoever they are, should be able to watch their team in safety. And of course, the Prime Minister saying it was the wrong decision. We will not tolerate anti-Semitism. The role of the police is to ensure fans can enjoy the game without fear of violence or intimidation. I'm sort of a bit disappointed that we haven't seen some leadership from Lisa over this. Now, of course, you can't break from, what her colleagues around the cabinet table or her
collective,
boss, saying, but I think there is a role, and a really important role, for her to come out and to communicate why football matters, why it is such an integral part of community building across borders as well as within a country. I sort of hope she does do that over the weekend. Maybe she will before the show goes out.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot. I mean, what's interesting about it is that, and we were talking about this with Sam Friedman when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago, there is a conflation of the current government of Israel in its actions, all Israelis and all Jews globally. And what I find interesting is that much of the previous argument has been about the conflation of Jews that really have nothing to do with the Netanyahu government, what it's doing in Gaza, being held responsible in a way for what is happening. But this isn't that. This is the kind of second category. It's a conflation of anything Israeli with the actions of the Israeli government. And that may be clunky, but I'm not sure it's anti-Semitic. Do you see what I mean?
I do, yeah.
The difference targeting a sort of expression of Israeli society, whether fair or not, for the actions of the Israeli government, especially in sport, is something that has happened before and does happen. Countries boycott Olympic Games if they don't like the host. I'm not sure where this falls in that equation.
And I haven't seen all of the security and intelligence reporting. Of course I haven't. None of us have. But I have seen conflicting interpretations of it over the last couple of days, where some people have been saying, no, it was definitely the Tel Aviv fans that began the violence in Amsterdam. And then Dutch fans reacted to it, some of them with anti-Semitic responses, which then escalated it. Which, of course, if true, would be quite different from, we can't guarantee that they won't get anti-Semitic abuse initially, which will cause them to then retaliate.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's all really twisted. Traditionally, football firms do contain nationalist elements.
Yes.
And so it wouldn't surprise me if there are parts of the Maccabi Tel Aviv firm that feel there is a sort of impunity at the moment to them doing and saying whatever, because any reaction is usually anti-Semitic, because people do have that profound confusion.
You're a Spurs fan, of course.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of Jewish fans that back your team, and they must get, when you're playing certain away matches, they must get some of that. Certainly tongue-in-cheek chants, if not over anti-Semitism.
And the other way around, I would say, like I used to participate in chants when I had a season ticket. And I was pulled up on it by David Baddiel because we were working together at the time. I was doing the musical version of The Infidel with him. And my reaction was quite hostile at first. It was, it felt like he was trying to take something away from me. That was in no way anti-Semitic. It was kind of celebrating Jewishness. But the way he explained it made me understand that it doesn't matter how you use the term. If you're not yourself Jewish, you can't really reclaim something that is a slur. And he won that argument, and those chants have largely disappeared. So it's a complicated area. And people's intentions, I think, matter. They are paramount, actually, that you come from an honest, open place of not wanting to offend people, of being open to the arguments. And I'm not sure that people getting involved in this at the moment are all in that category. Let's have a little listen to what Kemi Badenoch had to say.
I think it is a national disgrace. This is something that the police should be able to deal with. We cannot be a country where we tell Jewish people that they can't come to watch football because their security is not going to be looked after.
Are you calling on West Midlands Police to overturn this decision, Kemi Badenoch?
Yes, they should, and if not, the Home Secretary should get involved. Last week she was telling us all the things that she wanted to do for Jewish people. I didn't believe her then, and if the Home Secretary can't do it, then the Prime Minister should. He needs to show that he's got a backbone and isn't so weak that he will just allow Jewish people to be terrorised here.
I think just coming out and going, this is a national disgrace, is unhelpful from any politician.
She doesn't have anything else to say.
I'm getting so tired of Badenoch's bullshit, to be honest. She only has 2 volumes, 10 and irrelevant. The only way in which she can be relevant is not via content, nuance, intelligence, imagination, creativity, policy, nous, cleverness. The only way she has of becoming relevant is by cranking up the volume to 10. And I'm getting really tired of it. And it's really unhelpful during a divisive time. And of course, Jenrick also jumped on the bandwagon to suggest that, see, I was right about Birmingham. When I said that I went up there and saw no white faces, this proves that Birmingham has become a sort of racist enclave. And those unhelpful voices come from both sides, right? One of the independent group of MPs came out with a just incredibly unhelpful statement, again, bunching together a team from Israel with like genocide. Yeah. All of you, just take a fucking breath and count to 10, right? It serves no one to crank up the volume and put up the heat on this issue that is already threatening to overboil.
Well, the person who is serving for his own political ends is, of course, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, aka Tommy Robinson, never known to be far away from an event that might spark community division. What's he up to this time, Alex? And what's his kind of heritage with getting involved in Israel v. Palestine?
I will try and give a short rundown, okay? Stephen Yaxley Lennon basically tweeted a photo of him wearing a Maccabi Tel Aviv shirt. Actually, it's an old shirt, because the player that it has on the back, Oscar, no longer plays for Maccabi Tel Aviv. It's obviously an old photo that he had on his phone and posted to say, who's coming to the match to support Maccabi Tel Aviv? Quite interesting for a nationalist to be suggesting we should be supporting the foreign team. He's doing that from Israel. He's on a visit to Israel at the moment, at the invitation of a minister in Netanyahu's government, who has invited Stephen Yaxley Lennon, despite British Jewish organizations like the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Jewish Leadership Council, issuing a statement saying, don't do this, that Robinson is, and I quote, a thug who represents the very worst of Britain, and talking about the diaspora minister, Amichai Chikli. In our darkest hour, he has ignored the views of the vast majority of British Jews who utterly and consistently reject Robinson and everything he stands for.
Let me explain to you what's going on here. The elitist Jews, yeah, the ones who are not representative of the entire community, the woke, liberal, elitist Jews, the ones like the Board of Deputies, Netanyahu and his government are conservative. They're not woke, they're not liberal. I've been invited by the conservative government. So, of course, you're going to see the woke, liberal Jews getting upset.
His favourite thing is being abroad and lobbing Molotov cocktails into the UK, tweeting about this match while doing interviews with this minister on his platform, in which they say that Starmer is beholden to the Muslim Brotherhood and he's the weakest prime minister since Chamberlain, and stuff like that. An Israeli minister sitting there with a far-right thug making references to Nazi Germany as if it's the other side.
It is the world upside down, and what the Board of Jewish Deputies know and the ministers in Netanyahu's government who have invited him either don't or are choosing to ignore is that herein lies a man who almost certainly is anti-Semitic himself. But it's my enemy's enemy is my friend situation because he is even more Islamophobic perhaps than he is anti-Semitic. Because let's not forget, he published and later deleted a long article
called The Jewish Question,
in which he asserted there are powerful Jews who have their finger on the buttons of power. They've got fingers in the entertainment industry, big tech, mainstream media, music industry, Hollywood, governments, spreading this theory that there are sort of powerful Jews controlling the world that we live in, trying to claim again that they've got this power and money that other groups don't have, and they're using it to control the rest of us. He's trying to drive a wedge between reform, liberal Jews and much more conservative Jews. So, the Jewish deputies know this, that the board do. Most Jews in Britain know that this is not a man who would really stand up for them should they need him to, but that he's doing it at the moment for his own political ends to talk up the Islamification of Britain and all this nonsense about London being under Sharia law because of Sadiq Khan.
Yeah.
It is grotesque.
And if anyone needed a reminder of how this plays out, only on Thursday, 3 neo-Nazis were convicted for amassing a vast arsenal of various weapons, including laser-printed guns, and planning attacks on mosques and synagogues. The notion that somehow the far right is an advocate for the Jewish people is for the birds. Anti-Semitism, this idea of white replacement and globalism, is at the center of its DNA, and it will always be there. And if the state of Israel thinks it can make a sort of convenient alliance for the time being with people like Tommy Robinson, then in my view, all they are doing is widening the gap between them and the global Jewish community, already looking with astonishment at what is going on in Israel.
Quiet riot.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Komm du Nosk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify, spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Quiet riot.
Now, he lost, get over it, has been the clarion call of Brexit since 2016. Well, it turns out that without any reflection, any admission of the monumental damage, any apology, a lot of people are struggling to get over it, to find closure. Fascinating new research by Best for Britain shows that the group of people who think Brexit was a terrible mistake is growing, but emotionally still pretty raw about it, and is there for the taking if politicians simply understand its needs. Why does this matter? Well, there is a budget coming up next month, and there is a growing consensus that it is time we all stopped tap dancing around one of the core reasons, if not the core reason, why the UK is in economic difficulty. Naomi, this is your baby. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Alex. And I think you're right. This mantra of you lost, get over it was always so tedious because while Leavers thought they'd won the referendum in 2016, Remainers knew that we'd all lost. And we can deconstruct the merits and demerits of how that election was campaigned on by the Remainers, particularly George Osborne. But fundamentally, what was correct was that we were going to take a very significant economic hit, and we did. And so finally now, political discourse is catching up with economic reality. For the last 10 years, we have had governments that have tried to make the best of Brexit, make Brexit work. Brexit will be great for the country. This is our sovereignty back. We can go forth and trade with the rest of the world. And pretty quickly, actually, voters came to realize that that wasn't true, that we were not supplementing the losses from the single market with brilliant boosts to our GDP by signing deals with Australia and New Zealand and India, etc. And so what our work at Best for Britain has done is basically to reinforce the evidence base for Rachel Reeves that she's right to be saying this. Now, if only they'd said it previously, yes, we can all coulda, woulda, shoulda, but I'm grateful that they're doing it now. And we'll leave a link in the show notes, and I'd love listeners to read it and particularly to share it with their MPs. But let me just talk you through the kind of the conclusions of why what we found fits with the reality of the economic situation Reeves is grappling with. So the notion that Brexit has been a failure has really widespread appeal. Okay, you've got over 3 in 5 voters saying it's been more of a failure than a success. And that includes people who switched from the Conservatives to Labour at the last election.
Yeah.
And it includes reform-curious Labour voters. So people who did vote Labour last year, but who are now saying, actually, I might vote Farage next time round, because only 11% of them think Brexit has been a success. And so discussing how Brexit has damaged the UK economy will resonate with voters across party lines, particularly across that coalition that Labour would need to hold together if there was to be an election anytime soon. And messages around the impact of Brexit on EU trade land really well with Conservative to Labour switchers. So a lot of those people that abandoned Sunak last year and came over to Labour. And it is the most popular reason among them for believing that Brexit has been a failure because of its impact on trade.
The Office of Budget Responsibility, who provide the independent forecasts for government, they have consistently overestimated our productivity performance.
Because of Brexit?
Austerity, Brexit, and the ongoing impact of Liz Truss's mini-budget. All of those things have weighed heavily on the UK economy. Already, people thought that the UK economy would be 4% smaller because of Brexit. Now, of course, we are undoing some of that damage by the deal that we did with the EU earlier this year. But there is no doubting that the impact of Brexit is severe and long-lasting.
Did you not also highlight a piece of research about 3 weeks ago that showed that the most headbangery Brexit types have already migrated from the Conservatives to reform anyway?
You're dead right, Alex, because what Labour can do in pointing out the link between Brexit and the economy is this. They can hold together this really big coalition because openly discussing the damage rallies the support of Labour, Lib Dem and Green supporters. It's unlikely to cause any backlash from Conservative and even many Reform voters. And it can put Reform UK on the back foot because it's their leader who is taking the blame for it, because we asked, and who do you blame? And of current party leaders, they blame Farage for how badly Brexit has damaged the economy.
Yeah.
And so negative framing around Brexit and its impact on the economy and, of course, cost of living is going to be better suited than language which discusses improving EU relations in a positive framing. So we have seen a total consolidation of Brexiters behind Reform UK, and everybody else is being drawn over to the other side, this pro-European side.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing is people are drawn
people
to
who
reform.
are still Brexiters, right? That's what you mean. Because there's been a lot of switches and there's a lot of people who are kind of ambivalent about it now. But the people who are still committed to the Brexit cause have all gone to reform anyway.
That's right. So ConLab switchers and Labour voters thinking about voting reform are now drawn to Reform UK because of the anti-immigration message, but they are repelled away from them by their pro-Brexit heritage. So that's what's so interesting about this research, is that it is showing that people that are voting reform are doing so because of immigration, but where you can peel them away and where they are not impressed with Farage is on his position with Europe. And that is why actually you're seeing him talk less and less and less about it, because he knows that this is true too.
I mean, it's also interesting that it is connected to immigration, that Brexit made immigration a whole lot worse. You only need to look at the stats.
Are you still suggesting Brexit was a success? Do you remember a promise you said when you had a show here on LBC, I think in 2017?
If Brexit is a disaster, I will go and live abroad. I'll go and live somewhere else. Well, economically, Brexit's working. Where Brexit has been a failure and where people are upset is not because of Brexit, but because of the Conservative Party's total failure to implement it.
Can this be done within the confines of what Labour promised in its manifesto? Or are people at the stage where they don't really care if some of those pledges are breached?
Well, I don't think Labour care if some of their manifesto pledges are breached, because I think they have already breached a few of them and certainly done things that weren't in their manifesto at all. But yes, what this is seeking to do, Rachel Reeves is going to have to put taxes up, and she needs an excuse as to why. And the excuse that she's reaching for is leaving the single market has had such a profoundly negative impact that we're going to have to redress the balance somehow. Now, Remainers will be saying, well, why don't you rejoin the single market then? If this is your diagnosis, why don't you take the medicine? Doing that would be a breach of a red line in the manifesto. They are still committed to not rejoining the single market. I don't think it's going to hurt for them to feel that pressure. And I would encourage Remainers to challenge her on that basis, going, no, we've always agreed with you on this being a Brexit budget, but come on, you've got to go further. But what we know that they're doing is a good first step on the agri deal and the defence deal and the energy deal. And what they need to do is to keep the pressure up on Europe for those gains to be felt, and then to go further and to do the stuff that will really begin to grow the economy.
Yes.
And who knows, one day that might mean single market access.
As I've said many, many times, people need to distinguish between what position is useful for them to take or hold or shout about, and their expectation of government immediately switching to exactly that position. That's not how it works. Saying, I understand why Labour cannot promise full fat rejoin right now. That's not to say that you shouldn't be shouting for full fat rejoin. If that's your position, you should absolutely be doing that. That's how Brexit happened, by those people sticking to the idea that the UK should leave the European Union for decades.
For 40 years.
Until it found fertile ground. So people just need to understand that it's a long haul. It's not about saying, I want government to do X, and then a week later, they haven't done it, therefore I'm throwing my hands up and supporting some other party. Another question, is there a danger that while the pivot does not affect the number of voters leaning in a particular direction, it does affect their motivation, that it might fire up the core reform vote?
So what you're saying is, by making this about Brexit, you're going to kind of reignite the motivation of 2016?
Yeah, because one of the findings,
I think, who never voted actually voting because they cared about it.
One of the findings of the new bit of research is that Remainers feel stronger about Brexit than Leavers do right now. Because they won the referendum and it's not gone well, they've sort of emotionally detached bit by bit from it. While Remainers are still really quite annoyed about it because they can see the effect. So if you pivot in that direction, do you risk reigniting that fervour in Leave voters to feel stronger about it again?
They've moved on from it being about Brexit and are making it about immigration. So for sure there is a risk. And this is where we inevitably in this show come back to talking about PR, that there's a repeat of 2019, where you have all of that Leave vote consolidated behind one party. In this situation, Nigel Farage's Reform UK rather than Boris Johnson's Conservatives. Meanwhile, those who are more relaxed about immigration and do like the EU get fragmented across 4, 5, however many parties on the left of politics. And that is why it's going to be absolutely critical for there to be alliance deals, non-aggression pacts, tactical voting, etc., until we get this bloody system changed for the better. But really, the Leave voters have moved on from the EU. Reform voters themselves are split 3 ways on whether they think it was a successful failure or don't know. And what's binding them is the issue of immigration. So it is much more emotive, yes, on the Labour, Lib Dem and Green side than it is on the Reform side. And Conservatives themselves are now twice as likely to say Brexit has been a failure than a success. And the main reasons Tories cite for Brexit having been a failure are its impact on the economy and disruption to the UK's trade with the EU. So I think we've just got to remember that the next election is almost certainly going to be fought on whether or not people feel better off.
Yeah.
If they begin to feel better off, they will give the government a much more open hearing on other issues. If they don't, this government is screwed. This government has got to turn things around on the economy.
Yeah.
And for once, finally, instead of having a government saying, Brexit's great, we're going to make a great success of Brexit, we've got one that is prepared to say it has been terrible and we've got to undo some of that.
And other voices within cabinet resisting this? If there are, why are there? The only reason I can think of is there maybe some regional variation, which means that pivoting to that position might be a boost in some constituencies, but a burden in others?
The main growth when you align on regulatory issues will be felt in the Red Wall, the West Midlands, the North East, Yorks and Humber. So if you're a cabinet member who is also an MP for a constituency that voted leave, actually chances are, because you are more likely to have a manufacturing base than a services base in your area, any further alignment will only see a disproportionate amount of growth for your region than, say, for London and the South East. I don't think there are voices in the cabinet resisting it. There might be people who attend cabinet who resist it. I think we have a lot of allies around the cabinet table, and work like this is really about empowering them with the evidence to give challenge to anyone who might be resistant and might be still stuck in the trenches of fighting the 2017 general election to say, no, this is going to work. And by God, we need it. So I don't think there are too many voices, in actual ministerial positions that aren't totally won over. I mean, look, for God's sake, Rachel Reeves is the key champion of a closer relationship with Europe and calling for an ambitious youth mobility deal. She represents a West Leeds constituency that voted leave and was probably one of the more sceptical members of the cabinet when it came to alignment. If she's won over,
she's moved a long way.
If she's moved, sure as hell the rest of them have.
Quiet Riot. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. We could all use more time. Amazon Business offers smart business buying solutions, so you can spend more time growing your business and less time doing the admin. I can see why they call it smart. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com. Quiet Riot.
But Alex, I've done most of the talking in this section. And I think what we're discussing here is sort of opportunism in politics versus long-term planning and all of that stuff around making a decision today that actually the impact of might not be felt until you're no longer in government. Do you think we're seeing any kind of shift in how arguments are fought and won?
I've been seeing an increasing number of conversations about something that has fundamentally changed in our political system, which is that politicians are no longer making or trying to win medium and long-term arguments. Once you hear that, you start to see it everywhere, actually. You start to hear politicians only trying to win the next round of media, and definitely not doing what Thatcher did, what Blair did, what to an extent Cameron tried to do and failed, which is to make a slightly more long-term argument. I know you disagree with me on this as a voter base right now, but I will show you why it's right. They're no longer doing that at all. They seem to be taking their lead from what voters think is right and just going with that. And because what voters think is right is quite changeable, first of all, that makes politicians inconstant, I think. And more importantly, we get no conversation about whether policies are right or not. It's been astonishing. I've really been looking out for that conversation in the media for the last maybe 2 months. I've kept a careful eye out for it every time a policy is announced. The conversation is it eye-catching? Will it help them in the polls? Will it grab tomorrow's headlines? How will it be fought by the other side? I have not heard a single conversation that asks, is this policy good for the country?
Is it fair? Is it equitable? Will it last the test of time?
Yeah.
Is it moral? Is it the right thing to be doing? Will it help in the long term? None. None at all. And I think this is exemplified by conversations about the budget. that has come to be seen as completely allocatory. This is the pot of money we have. How do we divvy it up among public services? And that's not what a budget is meant to be. A budget is meant to drive policy. You're meant to decide that this is what the country needs, this is how we get there, and this is how we fund it. The budget is the last piece of that puzzle, not the first piece of that puzzle. The budget shouldn't be the beginning of the conversation that says, this is how much money you have, do the best you can with it.
But then isn't the problem that lack of vision? Isn't it coming back to that thing we've talked about time and time again, which is we don't really know where Starmer wants to take the country. And if the leader isn't setting out that vision, how is anyone meant to then fund that vision without kind of having to resort to making up the plan for the country as it writes the budget?
I think you're right, but I also think you're wrong to confine it to Starmer as a Starmer problem. Who has vision? I think it's a politics problem, not just even in this country. I think it's something that's replicated really across the world. A lack of people who are saying, this is where I want to lead, and that's how we get there. It's completely absent. Maybe some of them will say, well, we don't have a voter base who cares about that, who has the long-term attention span to attach itself to a plan like the creation of the NHS or the creation of the welfare state and see it through. But I don't think you can know that unless you try it. I don't think you can run a country as if you're running a corner shop and then complain that people only want to buy chiclets, because that's what you're selling, mate. If you sold something bigger and more substantial, then someone might want to buy it.
Quiet, riot.
The season of it's too warm for a big meal is definitely over, and we are now firmly in the season of it's too depressing not to put my face in a bowl. Comfort food is one of the joys of autumn. Curries, stews, pasta bakes and risottos, mash with gravy and batch bakes.
It's not just that risotto is comfort food, I think it's comfort cooking. And I know that a lot of people make a fuss about making risotto and worry about, when it's the right stage and is it too finicky. But I have to say, I find mindless repetitive activity, this is what this is, just stirring, immensely comforting. Perfect. Now, in theory, this would be enough for supper for two. In practice, I rather feel one.
So what are our favourite October warmers? Naomi, what is the dish you most look forward to when the weather gets a little bit cold?
Well, I'm going to break it down by meal because I think I can change up everything. Summer and spring, it's the yogurt in the morning with fresh fruits. And then when we get into this time of year, it can be a lovely big hot bowl of porridge topped with frozen berries that you've defrosted and turned jammy on top. And then lunch goes from being a salad to a lovely warming bowl of soup. And I like to batch cook soup at the weekend and then take it into work each day to have that lovely, yummy, warming meal in the middle of the day. And then dinner, as you've mentioned at the top, all of those big one-pan winter warmers, whether they're chilies or curries or pies. I love a mash-topped pie. So whether you want to call it a shepherdless pie as a vegan or cottageless pie or whatever. But I like to mix a mixture of a 2-to-1 ratio of sweet potato to white potato. You need the white potato to give it the starchy integrity so the mash doesn't sink into the bottom layer, but then the kind of sweetness and autumnal colour that mixing in the sweet potato with gives it is just chef's kiss beautiful. So those are my kind of autumn switches, if you like, that I love doing. What about you?
I was thinking about it because we said we were going to talk about it, and I was thinking about it ahead of recording, and I realized that I go quite vegetarian in autumn. I think because the produce that's around is so good. Crumbles, they really are too hot and too stodgy a pudding to have in summer, I think. But for autumn, where you get all the great apples and pears and all of that coming through.
And the late rhubarb that is far too sour to not be completely doused in sugar and baked in a crumble.
And the spices that make that kind of concoction come to life, cinnamon and things, they just scream autumn. I absolutely love them this time of year. mushrooms. I mean, this is the season of mushrooms, and especially wild mushrooms. And you can't do better than a mushroom risotto, in my view.
No, there is no risotto better than a mushroom risotto.
It is just utterly, utterly delicious. I love squash soup. But also, interestingly, I think it's a very good season for cooking with frozen spring vegetables. So it's also when I revive recipes like frozen pea chicken tray bake. It's a great thing to do. There's also another very Greek recipe called artichokes à la polita. Basically, in Greece, we have these vegetable stews called yachni. The part that doesn't change is tomato, potato, and dill. But the other parts change. They can be green beans with potato and dill, etc., etc. But one of them is artichokes and peas. And artichokes and peas are two vegetables that are better frozen because artichokes, oh my God, are they a faff to clean fresh?
Yeah, and cook.
Exactly. But buying a packet of the hearts already cleaned and prepped and a bag of frozen peas and making artichokes à la polita with potato and tomato and loads of dill. I cannot tell you how delicious and naturally vegan that is. I have found a recipe for artichokes à la polita that's actually really good, and I will drop it in the show notes. And I will also drop a recipe for green beans, because I know some people have a problem with they have a problem with their sort of the texture of artichokes. They don't like
right. So you
the
can switch it out for green
softness
beans.
of them. So I will.
But there is a
put
glut
in
of
an
green
alternative.
beans. I'm seeing so many people with allotments go up. Well, give me an idea of what I can do with these green beans. We've been eating them for 3 weeks and now.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a great idea for green beans because green beans are its main ingredient. It's called fasolaki yachni.
Yummy. And listeners, it's going to be World Vegan Day soon. And I've done a very special recipe for the Best Written Substack to mark World Vegan Day. So if you're signed up over there's a 90-day free trial. You'll be getting that recipe from me to you in about a week's time, I think.
Cool. And we'll pop a link for that in the show note. We'll pop a link for all the other recipes in the show note. Oh, and we'll leave a link in the show notes to the full report that we were talking about earlier, about the economic impact of Brexit. So we'll pop that in the show notes. It's going to be quite busy show notes.
You got a lot of homework, guys.
And that's it for this weekend Sunday School. Thank you so much for lending us your ears once again and letting us fill your ears with food ideas.
I'm working on that very exciting project. So as a reminder, that's going to take me away from the show for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back in early November. I will miss you all lots in the meantime, but I promise to enjoy tuning in as the punter instead. And to give Kenny and Alex a decent boost in my absence, don't forget to pop over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod and sign up to support the show for £5 a month or more, because then we might even be able to convince Alex to have a little break at some point too.
Fat chance. We are back on Wednesday with Quiet Riot regular Zoe Williams standing in for you. And then we have, I think, Alpha Snell standing in for you. So your absence will be smoothed.
Not be felt.
Will be smoothed. Nothing can completely make it go away, but it will be smoothed by the presence of other friends to brighten the colder months of the year. So if you can't support us on coffee, fear not. You can leave us reviews, share episodes with friends, help us grow the audience, and don't forget to visit our bookshop. The link is in the show notes.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and please remember to keep on quietly writing.
Now, I'm off to record some sort of jazz album, and we love you lots and lots and lots. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot. On Saturday, there's going to be another big protest march in every state in America, and in many call it the No Kings Rally. The demonstrations will be peaceful, unless you're watching Fox News, in which case they will be violent, vicious Antifa riots led by savages who hate America.
I encourage you to watch. We call it the Hate America rally that'll happen Saturday. Let's see who shows up for that.
Their Hate America rally takes place on Saturday.
They're having this Hate America rally.
They have to wait till this Hate America rally is over.
Their I Hate America rally.
This is a We Hate America rally.
We Hate America rally.
Hate America rally.
The I Hate America and I Want to Be a Marxist rally.
We call it the Hate America rally because you'll see the hate for America.
A good one.